Thank you again for attending, and we'll pass it over to the presenters. And yes, please feel free to welcome everyone in the chat and introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation, Reimagining Freshman Composition, Challenges, Opportunities, and Insights from the D2S2 project. My name is Anneke Snyder, and I am a PhD candidate in the English department at Texas A&M University.
Hi, everyone. My name is Khimen Cooper, and I teach English courses over at Collin College in kind of outskirts of the DFW area.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I am Gwendolyn Inoncencio. I'm also a PhD candidate with Anneke at the Texas A&M University, and I'm going to introduce our theme for today. You'll notice we're taking a lighthearted, playful approach because our colleagues from our 1301 and our 1302 teams did a fantastic job yesterday in their Crafting a Texas Tapestry presentation around 2:45 yesterday. Hopefully you all were able to attend that, but if not, they did a fabulous job of formally introducing our project and the perimeters and what it is about. And we were hoping today to do a more informal talk about what it took to put that team together and how it translates into something that you might be interested in when you form your collaborative teams and when you put students in their collaborative teams. So our use of Sanrio characters is unconventional here, but it's a metaphor for the diverse perspectives in freshman composition. So like Hello Kitty, always kind, Choco Cat, always curious, and Karapi, always adventurous, students bring unique strengths to the classroom. So these characters' coexistence in a shared universe mirror the microcosm of our students' collaboration in academic writing. So this playful analogy underscores our goal of fostering an environment where diverse viewpoints enrich the writing process, emphasizing individuality, teamwork, and mutual respect in reimagining freshman composition. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And my job here is to kind of introduce briefly in layman's terms what the project we're dealing with. Now, we had a first and second phase, two previous phases of this project, and they included supplemental resources for the composition branch of first-year students housed in a digital repository called OER Texas. And Anneke, our project manager, can link you to any of those things. It's still a very useful resource. But Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board spearheaded this third phase of this exciting initiative called D2S2, which is Digital Design for Student Success. And it's about reimagining how we approach those crucial introductory courses that so many students must take. So two teams of instructors from Texas institutions work to develop course materials for those high demand intro classes. And it wasn't about rehashing old content. It was an attempt to draw on the research in learning and development and making use of open educational resources, along with finding smart ways to integrate co-requisite instruction. So one of the most innovative aspects was how we were trying to weave success interventions right into the fabric of the course content. And it's not just about the material itself, but how it's taught. So attempting forward-thinking pedagogical techniques to help students not just learn and succeed, but not to use knowledge transfer.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. So as Gwendolyn mentioned, there were two other phases to this project, one in summer of 2022, one in summer of 2023, and then this past summer of 2024 was the third phase of the project. And in this third phase of the project, there were, I believe, 5 courses that were being developed, 3 in math and 2 in rhetoric and composition. So our team was in charge of creating the materials for English 1301 and English 1302, which are the 2 beginner or first year or freshman composition courses. So the goal was to have these teams create materials to create a syllabus, major assignments, course outline, pacing guides, things that a teacher who was teaching this course for the first time would need to teach the course, to create the curriculum to teach the course. So our audience was really thinking about the graduate student who had never been taught, who had never taught before, or the new faculty member who had never taught this course before, or maybe the person who, you know, got told on a Friday that they're teaching this course on a Monday, that kind of a thing, and just give them kind of that help that they need and know that they could go and find these quality materials that could be adapted for different teaching situations across Texas. Khimen?
Yeah, so they both kind of mentioned this, but the main thing that we're focusing on was our experiences with the Comp 2 courses, Comp 1 and Comp 2 courses, and basically figuring out like how to create these courses so they would work at any Texas higher institute. And so going from 4-year to 2-year to embedded dual credit, and trying to just really make these courses so it doesn't matter where you're at, they could still be flexible enough to work at any of these institutions that are going to obviously have different requirements, different demographics, different technology. And so today we're basically just going to talk about kind of how that was working with a variety of groups and teams, and trying to create something that had to work with such a diverse audience. So kind of our different roles. I'm sort of speaking for the English 1301 team. I was part of the team that created the 1301 course material over the summer. There was 4 of us. And then Gwendolyn is representing the 1302 team. They had a team of 3. And then Anneke is our project manager, which I personally like to call her our wrangler. She's an amazing person who somehow handled all of us for the entire summer. On top of that, we also had our fearless leader, Terri, and then we had a copyright and accessibility specialists that were working with us nonstop the entire time as well.
Thank you, Khimen. So Terri, Dr. Pantuso, who is the project leader, and I had regular meetings with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to kind of lay out the parameters and meet the goals of this project. So in January, this is when this project, this 3rd phase, was first introduced. And then throughout the spring semester, Terri got the team members together, found people, recruited people. And then at the end of April, we had our first kind of major team meeting. And then what the coordinating board is referring to as the Creator Academy and the content creators. And then from May to July, the 2 teams, 1301 and 1302, broke into their teams and focused on their content creation for their courses. So for Comp 1 and for Comp 2. And then at the beginning of August, the content was due so that it could be piloted by the beginning of the fall semester. So we have people in fall of 2024 piloting the materials. And then the goal is to take what the feedback the pilots have given, revise, polish, pilot a revised version in the spring, get feedback again, revise and polish, and then in the summer of 2025, have the content available to the public, what the coordinating board is calling the Affiliate Academy. So it was about 1.5 years from conceiving of this project and this idea to getting it rolled out to the public. We're just gonna chat with you all about some responses to some of the questions, some of the issues, some of the things that came up as we were working on this from our different perspectives. So the first of the 3 questions that we're going to respond to is, what was the most significant hurdle you faced during content creation? And Khimen, if you could go ahead and start us off.
I think for us, it was trying to figure out what I mentioned before. How are we going to create this course content in a way that will work for basically anyone who might need it? And so that meant that we had to have a conversation about what are the different things that we do and have done at previous institutions that we've been at. Thankfully, our team was really diverse. And so we had a team member who is at a 4-year and she's an English program coordinator. We had 2 team members who are at 2-year colleges, both working with, second language learners, workforce students, dual credit students. Sometimes the dual credit students were coming to us. Sometimes we were going to their high school. And then our 4th team member was an embedded dual credit instructor. And so because of all of those different experiences and perspectives, I think that was our first big thing, was just like talking about, well, at this school, we're required to do this, but at that school, they're not allowed to do that. And seeing that, like, imagine if all the other voices joined in, what they would be saying. So how can we make this so that it'll still work? And so, like, for example, one of the big ones was what types of outside sources Comp 1 students need to be using? Like, should they be using outside sources? Should they be learning attribution and all of this? Because there's going to be some programs where Comp 1 is really just the writing process and not bringing in any sources, whereas there are others that are already having them do annotated bibliographies, and that's a requirement of that program. And so that was kind of a big thing that we tried to figure out, is how do we have that balance and also have that flexibility so that the instructors who use this content, they know that they can move things around if they need to based off of their needs, their students' needs, and also their institutional needs. Gwendolyn?
Okay, yes. And I want to continually be reminding of this specific audience, because it's fun to talk about the project we did and we learned so much, but I always want to bring it back to, you're here to take something away from what we did. And what we did was really felt insurmountable task at times, because we had to consider this wide range of audiences. I mean, I'm from an R1 university. I am a graduate candidate right now. I'm immersed in rhetoric theory. I fashion myself as a rhetorician, yet my team was someone from Tarrant County, which is a large set of, I believe they have like 5 campuses of junior colleges. And then I was working with another lovely lady, Jackie Herman Elliott, that was Catherine Quisenberry at Tarrant County, and then Jackie Herman Elliott at Texas Women's University. And those are very different dynamics. And we're also, beyond taking our expertise coming together, and these are 2 established professionals. And then I'm still over here. And you all remember being a graduate student, you're still high-minded and deep in theory. And that's not always where the rubber meets the road. And so it was this constant push and pull of, I wanted this, I was grappling with literature versus rhetoric in this topic. And I felt very strongly that rhetoric and composition sometimes leaves the rhetoric out. And that in our current age and our current cultural moment that students are in, they are first and foremost usually not English majors, and they're out in this wildly political environment where they need the skills of rhetoric. Because as we learn as rhetoricians, if you don't understand how rhetoric works, rhetoric is used on you. It's a tool, and if we do not broach these tools, then and with our students, then they're not set up in this highly rhetorical, highly persuasive world that is trying to work on them and move them into different modes of persuasion. So that was kind of a little hill that I wanted to die on, but I kept constantly getting pulled back to, you're dealing with all of these co-requisite teachers or instructors who are dealing with all these odds. Like, they're in a junior college, they are dealing with students with different levels of ability. And it was a really nice reminder as a former K-12 teacher of, I have been insulated in this R1 university with these students who have come to me with amazing abilities. And this was not my expertise in this project, was to bring that knowledge there, but to also make sure it was kind of a level playing field for all abilities. So I really grappled with the literature versus rhetoric. And in the end, we always kept using that alchemy of collaboration. We had to find where our unique talents were and to use our group intelligence to create a flexible yet rigorous yet I guess just more dynamic course material for a range of instructors and a range of students. So I was really appreciative of never losing sight that we ask our students to be in collaborative groups, yet this was my dose of being in a collaborative group, and it is difficult. So in the end, we opted for always remembering our audience and making something that focused on rhetoric, but could very easily slot in literature if the situation called for it.
Yeah, from a project development point of view, what you both said has really resonated with me. And what really was difficult to navigate was that everyone had a different thing that they cared about. Like Gwendolyn said, like rhetoric was the thing that she cared about the most. For our accessibility specialist, making sure that all the material, all the things that were linked out to, everything we provided was accessible. For our copyright specialist, it was making sure that everything adhered to copyright, everything was properly attributed, right? And then, you get Terri, our leader, who was like, whatever needs to be done, just do it so that it can get done on time, right? So juggling these different perspectives and juggling what people cared about the most and navigating that and figuring out when things needed to be compromised, when things didn't have to be compromised, and considering also the bigger picture of everything. So while each team worked independently and like in their teams, I was attending all of the meetings with the teams, with the accessibility specialists, with the copyright specialists, with the coordinating board. So there was a lot going on, and there was a lot of me figuring out what to prioritize, right? Because if everyone has their own priorities, then what really is the thing that needs to be prioritized? And for different situations, it was different things. And some of the ways that we navigated that and we figured that out, I think, together as a group, where we had several alignment meetings with 1301 and 1302 coming together and talking to each other instead of talking through me as an intermediary about what they're doing and what they're planning. Having weekly announcements where I told everyone what meetings had taken place, what decisions had been made at those meetings, so they could follow up with me if they had any questions, just to make everyone feel like they were a part of their team, even if they were working independently on their own part of the project. I tried really hard to figure out what people's non-negotiables were, also figuring out like, we don't want to violate copyright law, for example, or we don't want to make a claim about accessibility that we can't uphold, those kinds of things. So making sure that everything was good and proper, right, from an administrative point of view. And then also both Khimen and Gwendolyn talked about their non-negotiables. So actually figuring out what everyone's non-negotiables were as individuals, but also figuring out as a team what were the non-negotiables and how was that in conversation with one another as we were building this curriculum for both courses. So it wasn't just a 1301 course and a 1302 course, but a 1301 course and a 1302 course that were cohesive and that could be used together. Khimen and Gwendolyn, any final thoughts before we move on? Okay. Okay, so we're going to go on to our next question, which was, how did you approach and balance issues of personal and social responsibility in your content creation? Khimen, if you'd like to start.
So for the 1301 content, one of the things that we were definitely aware of is that at the majority of institutions, Comp 1 has a heavier focus on the composition process, whereas Comp 2 has that heavier research focus. But along with the fact that there are going to be places that still require that research emphasis in Comp 1, we also all agreed that there are students who, they're expected to understand how to use outside research and integrate that into their own work when they're in other classes while they're also taking Comp 1, or right at the very beginning of their next semester when they haven't gotten a chance to get into that in depth with Comp 2. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we valued the personal, because I think a lot of times at the academic level, we feel like we kind of get lost in everything. We get lost in all of the other voices. And so for Comp 1, we started with the personal narrative. So the student, based off of which track the professor or the students choose, because we gave them a couple of track options, they start with that personal narrative. They figure out kind of like, what is this thing they're talking about? How do they feel about this thing? And to really emphasize that they are valuable. Their perspective is valuable. Their experience is valuable. But then after that, we started in units 2 and 3, bringing in those different types of sources and showing that, like, while this is a thing you're interested in and you can talk about, there are other people in this conversation. And so then we circled it back around with the final unit, where they kind of got to come back to like, but what do I think? But like, how did that perspective change? Like, how does your personal perspective change now based off of how you've been able to, pay attention to what the community is saying, whether it's the popular professional sources or even the scholarly sources that they were working with in units 2 and 3. So it's kind of that combination of that personal, but then also that, more academic, research aspect as well. And how has that changed where you stand? Gwendolyn?
Yes, and my approach, or excuse me, my team's approach was in an ideal world, the students would have the 1301 that Khimen and her cohort created, and then it would seamlessly flow into ours. And so we would know their prerequisite skills. But as we both know, that doesn't always happen. Some students come to us and they've had because 1301 is A&M's version of 103, which we don't have. And we only have 104, which is the 1302 that we created. So you can see the numbers get scrambled across different institutions. But basically, at A&M, and we realized in other institutions, they may only get our 1302, yet we don't necessarily have the time, the space, and the resources across the 15 to 16 weeks to teach them how to research. We have to almost assume a certain level of research skills. And so we had to just keep that tension in mind with that. Again, personal narrative. You can split the room on composition teachers. Some composition teachers were like, no, we are not doing personal narratives. And others are, of course, we have to do personal narrative. So we wanted to kind of split the difference there and make this a personal approach to research driven by what the students are interested in, with a long-term vision of that it addressed a social need. So we tried to, ride that balance, knowing that 1301 was going to have a personal narrative in there and cater it towards the students, because we all know that when students are intrinsically motivated about a topic, they're going to produce better and be more motivated and invested in their work. So what we did is we came up with, our first unit was assessing research context, like go out and let's see what you have available. A&M's got a fabulous library with 1 million databases. We can get our hands on anything. Some junior colleges can't. Some people might be limited to Google Scholar on the internet. So we try to think, what is your research context that you're in? And let's mine it for everything we can with this personal tract of what we're interested in as a social context. Then we moved into writing a research proposal, which is its own genre and needs some special instruction. Then we moved that into the research essay. And we were very careful not to call it a research paper. We wanted it to be a research essay because we did not want the student to lose themselves and their personal argument that went into this, even though it was a research-based, heavy argument that was personal and research. And then we ended with our PSA, which is a public service announcement. And that was where we really wanted it to be the final assessment for the students to basically translate the narrative and visual aspects of their research, that really integral part of not just, I have this research now, but how am I going to transmit it and translate it into a poignant 60 to 90 second visual punch that could either have words, didn't have to have words, could be high tech, could be low tech. It just allowed for that group intelligence that I really felt was critical about when you throw collaborative groups together, you have to be willing to see what that group intelligence is. And so that is how we sequenced ours, with knowledge of 1301, but also understanding that our students might not be privy to that type of preparation. So that was our approach for being socially responsible, trying to consider all the avenues as we were creating this content for students who could take their personal approach to something and put it out into the world with an eye for social context.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. I think this question of personal and social responsibility looks different from the administrative level, because as Gwendolyn and Khimen were both talking about, thinking about the students and thinking about the assignment creation. From an administrative level, there were a lot of things to consider because we were creating this content for the entire state of Texas in mind, like as our audience. Texas is a big state. So, what an instructor or a student might need from the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas might be completely different from what a student in the DFW area might need, or a student in the Galveston area might need, or an instructor at a community college versus an instructor at a four-year state university versus the dual enrollment teacher that has to adhere to both district regulations and curriculum and the local college's regulations and curriculum. So there were a lot of pieces to consider and a lot of things to think about. And within that diversity, thinking about things like who has access to certain kinds of technology, who doesn't, what LMS is the best to be used to house these course shells and to house this content. I remember having a conversation about Canvas being relatively universal, and then someone saying, no, they don't use that in the dual enrollment classroom, dual enrollment classes at the high school. They use Google Classroom. So trying to figure those things out, trying to figure out how to create this content with as much flexibility as possible, but also with as much guidance as that first year instructor might really need, was really interesting experience, and really led to a lot of questions that I don't necessarily have the answers to. I'm still thinking about a lot of them as we continue to build this content creation, but I think it was a wonderful place to start discussing what are the needs of the instructors and the students across Texas. Khimen, Gwendolyn, anything to add before we move on? Okay. So this question is a two-parter, and each participant can answer as they like. So the first part of it was, what were some of the collaborative challenges of the project? And the second part of it is, does this collaborative experience influence your approach to teaching? Khimen?
So for the 1301 team, we had a really positive experience. It was really great. The team was awesome, but it definitely took some work, and it took some awareness and being very transparent and communicative about the fact that teamwork isn't necessarily easy, especially when you're doing something like this, because most of us are used to creating our courses alone, right? And we're in our classrooms doing what we feel is best. And so, right, you bring all of those people that are used to doing this on their own into a space and say, well, now let's do it together. And also let's write it up in a document that's going to be, easy to understand for someone that potentially is already nervous and overwhelmed. And so we just tried to remain very aware of that. Something that we definitely did is we tried to bring up and work with our strengths and our weaknesses. I know it sounds a little bit canned, but just saying like, hey, this is something I'm really great at. I'd love to do that, but this thing over there, not my strong suit. So if somebody else is going to be awesome at it, then maybe that'd be good for you. So like personally, I'm really great with a student audience. Right. But, one of my team members, a couple of them, they're like, they're going to be a lot better with that more professional audience. So knowing that, okay, that language that we finalize with the documents, it might not be the same language that I would use when I'm writing up a prompt for my students. Right. And just staying aware of that audience constantly, and staying aware of ourselves as the audience. And Gwendolyn mentioned this earlier about a hill, but knowing that you can't die on all the hills, especially, when you're working on a team, and being very particular about which hill you're really going to hyper focus on. And so like Gwendolyn, I'm rhetoric all the way. And so when we start talking about rhetorical analysis, I'm very gung-ho, like rhetoric is more than just the appeals, right? And if I wouldn't have vocalized that, then I wouldn't have found out that the majority of our team felt the same. Right. And so I think one of the things was this fear of being polite and feeling like we might step on toes. So then if you just say what needs to be said, and then you might learn that like you're not the only one that's thinking it, actually maybe all of you agree on this. But everyone's just trying to be very professional and polite. And so we made sure that we weren't afraid of saying what needed to be said, but we joked the whole time. We really enjoyed our Zoom meetings and our interactions with each other. And we also broke into smaller groups. So we broke our 4 units so that there was a team of 2 working on each unit. And so while we had our big group meetings, then we would also break every week and have our smaller group meetings. And then we would come together and see how that went. And so when it comes to the classroom situation, though, like Gwendolyn also mentioned, it's a real reminder when we're telling students to work together, like we know it's hard, but sometimes we just remember it's hard in theory, but then whenever you're doing it, it's like, oh no, this is actually hard. But then also remembering that we're professionals, right? We're professionals who are experts in our field, and we're putting these students together in this space where they're already probably nervous and they feel insecure about things. They don't have the confidence in the subject matter that we happen to have in this. And just keeping that in mind, and being kind and giving them some grace, and knowing that you know, in our team, we may be able to quickly say, well, this is probably going to be the leader. This is probably going to be the creative person. This is going to be the person who like checks and edits. But, you know, our students, they're not quite as self-assured all the time. And so sometimes they might actually need us to be the one who points that out, or to have that extra space so they can learn how to do that because they don't quite know yet. So, anyways, Gwendolyn, what you got?
Yes, I would like to say everything that Khimen just said, but the way we could come together as professionals is and work through some of this, because we had the same emotions our students did. We got this big project with all these requirements dumped in front of us, and the first thing we did is what I see all the students do. We just kind of looked at each other like, what's our way into this? And then we had to, like, in lightning speed, find out, like Khimen said, who's the creative one, who's the organizational one, who has those strong skills. And shout out to Jackie if she's on. I mean, she was the Hello Kitty of us all. She kept us getting along. She was always kind. She's a big cheerleader. I don't know which Hello Kitty character I was, but I had my, dare I say, bitchy moments, because it's summer, y'all, and we had this massive amount of work to do. And we had 4 people and it got down to 3 people, and it's summer and we have family time. And, you know, we had to work so hard during the summer. It was like no break from our academic semesters. And so I'm going to quote Kathy in her conversation yesterday. I remember she said, at times it was stressful. It was. And that's the real world. And so we just kind of give our students these huge projects to do, but do we teach them how to do it? And so I'm a big believer in, first of all, we need to know our own unique individual personalities and where we come in at it. And so Khimen spoke to that so well, so I won't harp on that. But I just want to say, it just reinforced to me, if it was so difficult for us to do as professionals, as people with high emotional quotients of we know how to work in teams, it just was a stark reminder to me that we have got to provide maybe more of an entree or nurturing to our students of how to get started on this, because we all do because of our course loads. I'm sure we do a lot of group projects, but are we actually setting our students up for success within those groups so that they leave their groups knowing, you know, I always put a project leader in every group, and some students excel at that, some students buckle, but I always do it based on personality tests. And if you know anything about that, most of those personality tests are kind of junk psychology, but it's at least something that you can start with, and the students start saying, how do I handle pressure? Can I speak up when, as Khimen was saying, I'm scared to say something, but I need to say this. And then you find out everybody is kind of thinking the same thing. Group work is scary. And so it was just so revealing to me that this process was no less scary than anything we give our students. And the stakes were so high, and we had to get to know each other super quick. And we also had to deal with massive deadlines, and it turned out to be a massive amount of work done in a short period of time, but we did it. And so what I gleaned from that was a whole new respect. And I didn't go in with a zero understanding of this. I went in with, it just reinforced, like Khimen said, that, oh yeah, collaborative work is hard. If I didn't already know that, I really know it now. This was a case study for that.
So my position, again, in the administrative point of view, is a little bit different. But also I am full-time on this project, and I'm the only one of the team, of all of the teams, that was full-time on this project. So one of the challenges for me this summer was figuring out what my role is, and what Terri was going to be okay with me, like what decisions Terri was going to be okay with me making, which ones she would prefer me to defer to her on. So that sense of teamwork between me and our project leader was something I had to navigate, but also between me and I mentioned this earlier, and all the individual teams that were working was something that I had to navigate. And I will admit that one of the biggest struggles I had, and I know Gwendolyn has mentioned this to me before, is that sometimes, like, being nice and having to be firm on what decision is made, and like adhering to a deadline or adhering to a deliverable or something like that, was something that I struggled with. It's something that I continue to struggle with. And so balancing out being nice and having those necessary conversations, and also balancing out giving content creators the agency and the autonomy to do what they felt that they needed to be done and how they needed to create the content, with all of the restrictions and parameters around copyright, around accessibility, around even things that we would never think of, like, can we create in Microsoft OneDrive because of the licenses, and thinking about things like that. So I think we're all still figuring it out. We're all still working on this project in different ways. And that's the beauty, I think, of collaborative work, is we learn about the people around us, but we also learn more about ourselves. Gwendolyn and Khimen, any last thoughts to add? Okay.
I would like to say though that I really enjoyed it. I loved working with the team. I loved the times that we had, because we also had meetings where 1301 and 1302 would meet together. And then now, like, working with Gwendolyn from the 1302 team, like, we've really like had a lot of interesting different teams all mixed up, and it was a lot of work and it was a busy summer, but it was pretty excellent.
And I hope it's understood that I did enjoy it. It's just, I want to be real. It was tough at times, but the feeling of completing it was truly a group effort across both groups. Well, we want to leave you with glutathione. If you know anything about Sanrio, you know that this egg yolk is characterized as an apathetic, lethargic attitude, and it's always sighing, complaining, or trying to sleep away life. So, which is a perfectly natural reaction to complex challenges that demand engagement. I'm guilty. But we hope that our presentation shows that collaboration can combat this nihilistic response to meeting such a vast array of student and instructor needs across our state, which was a seemingly impossible task when it's just kind of dumped right in front of you. But our focus for this task always remained, who is our audience and what are our students' needs? And when we always came back to those questions, it was a unifying thread that ran across both teams and ultimately got us to our finished project, which is currently being piloted. And we are so excited to see, how we can make it better and what the successes of it are. And so it was just, again, thank you to everybody who allowed me to be on it. It was truly a learning experience.
Thank you, everyone. Now we have some time for questions.